Welcome back. Ciao. Glad to be here with my good friend Sara Roversi for a session called Rebuilding Food Systems in 2025. And man, there's so much to talk about. Sara Roversi with the Future Food Institute. I've been following your work, and you have been doing good work in the world of food system innovation, educating new leaders, activating change, and building lasting infrastructure in Italy and beyond for food system change. And so, you and I started talking about all the challenges that 2025 has brought to us and how we can perhaps continue to stay hopeful in this world of oftentimes crazy changes. So we're excited to talk today, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that you open up with ciao. Let's open up
Yes,
with ciao.
a limited Italian. I try, but for those who don't know about the Future Food Institute, can you take a minute or two just to describe what you do in the mission?
Okay. Yes. Also, because in these days we are talking a lot about, let's say, what we have been seeing and living during this decade, because we started, that was back 2012, when we started with
Wow.
Matteo and my co founders, where we were in another era. And we are jumping in a brand new era in these days. So during these years, the future food ecosystem, because we are an ecosystem, we have been trying to connect the dots within the global food system, trying to see food as really kind of a very powerful and positive weapon that can connect all the dots within the society. So the Future Food Institute in this more than a decade has been working in knowledge, education, but also R&D, innovation, say systemic thinking, future thinking, building scenarios, and so on, supporting public and private partners to nudge good innovation and bringing values within food. But also, the third the big pillar and the big chapter has been working with communities. Working with food communities not as a project base, but establishing homes that became our living labs where we are growing with these communities. So now, Future Food, we met at the beginning in US. We were very, say, present in US since the starting point with Michael Baker, the Google Food Lab, and so on. But then these years, many things has changed. So the Future Food ecosystem has been developing lots of educational programs, master's program, boot camps, digital programs, and then shift back now, understanding that we need connection and experiences because the era in which we're entering, and with also the AI collab, we are understanding that we need to empower people and focus on human development, whether we are going to be superhumans with this technology that can help us to accelerate everything, but then at the same time, let's say, we need also to understand how we can deal with that at every level, as humans, as parents, as food leaders, as farmers, as fishermen, as policymakers, and so on. And so
Yeah,
this
we
is a little
we
bit what we're
we met,
doing.
I think, first in the U.S., and then I got a chance to go to visit you in Bologna and speak and and visit and see what you're doing there. And man, since that time, I think it was around 2018, you guys have really grown with your reach. And you talked a little bit about your living labs, and so you are in Pollica, and you've also expanded to other new areas. So talk a little bit about your growth around the world in terms of building these new living labs where you're helping to bring people in, giving them experiences, and then building new leaders and kind of putting minds together and building community like you're talking about.
Yeah. So since day one, we understood that to make innovation in the food system, you need not only scientists, that for us are the first ally, but we need also to work with communities. So living labs are our offices and our homes where we try to accelerate, say, the adoption of technologies, models, policies, not with a top-down approach, but with a bottom-up approach. Co-designing with them and understanding that probably to build a better future and as Future Food Institute, the word future is core part of our DNA. To build a better future, we need to do it co-designing solutions with the people. Being very, say, mindful in keep going, developing processes that help us to safeguard the heritage, but also to transfer this heritage to the next generations ahead. And I think that the work that we have been doing together also this year with the Food AI Collab has been highlighting that now there's a huge need of bringing back values at the epicenter of every decision. And this is a little bit what we're doing. So in our living lab, we try to really foster the connection between values, humans, communities, technologies, with always food at the epicenter, using food as a tool to create diplomacy, to build bridges, but also
Sure.
to break barriers, but also to start to connect the dots in a time in history where everyone is frustrated in extending life and talking about longevity without understanding that when we're talking about food, we're talking about the real nexus that is connecting humans and nature, humans and the ecosystem, that we cannot live healthy in a sick planet. But while we are all stressed about feeding humans, we need also to understand that we need to feed them in a way that is not hurting the planet, but is regenerating the planet we're living in. And now we are in the middle of, I think, the deepest crisis from the environmental perspective, the social perspective, the cultural perspective, but also the spiritual perspective,
Mm.
because humans have been breaking all the good, safe space where we were also feeding ourselves from the cultural and the spiritual perspective.
Yeah, you've been at this for 10 years and you do amazing work. But when I look around the broader world, it's oftentimes so discouraging. And in particular, 2025 has brought new challenges. And you wrote, I think, a very poetic post on Facebook and kind of thoughtful post around the dismantle or the U.S. backing away from UNESCO. And so, can you talk a little bit about the challenges you're seeing and kind of and put it in the context of like, the food system and then maybe we could talk about what we can do about that. But can you kind of outline the challenges you're seeing 2025 has brought us?
Absolutely, yes. Also, because this 2025 is highlighting how much, let's say, food is at the epicenter. And we see also in these hours what is happening. I'm talking about the crisis in Gaza, for example,
Yeah.
where food is the perfect example.
Mm.
Weaponizing our relationship brings food at the epicenter, that is the essential needs, but has been used also as a weapon in these days. So 2025 has brought us, I think, the deepest crisis we're facing, where I see AI as an incredible positive thing in some ways, but I see it also as a very bad thing for the life of next generations ahead, because we has been always seeing the positive thing, accelerating processes, accelerating the adoption of new knowledge, how fast we are going to come up with solutions. But on the other hand, you know how much we're working, for example, with youth, with our boot camps, with the schools, and so on. And I see the effect on them, and how also their mind now is working in a different way, coming up with different kind of understanding of the issues we are facing without having the tool to work with our mind in a way that can really solve issues, understanding that we need to preserve the ancestral knowledge, the good knowledge, and say all the elements we need. So going back to your question, this 2025 is showing us that, first of all, if I'm thinking when the FAO was born 80 years ago, eight
Wow.
zero, and the global challenge was solving hunger. Our favorite SDG, SDG 2, in 80 years, we have not been able to solve this issue. And if you think about the money that is needed to solve this issue, and the money that now has been invested to support different kind of industries, or also an industry that is the war industry, this drives you crazy.
Yeah.
Because if this is a real challenge, this needs to be a global commitment taken as a priority from everyone. So this year is highlighting what are the major crises we're facing, the major issues that have not been solved, knowing that we know that there are barriers that are clear, and it's just a matter of taking the decision and prioritize what is good for humans. So, of course, what I'm talking about are very complex things that are, say, still there, and that can be solved if humans start to work really on the same direction. Of course, in my post about UNESCO, there was a big delusion, because we know how much culture is fundamental, how much
Hmm.
food is part of our culture, and how much we can do just by acting on things that can have a systemic, not only solution, but a systemic impacts on multiple levels. In these years, we started adopting the integral ecological framework, the integral ecological development framework, that was first announced by Pope Francis in the Laudato Si, and then became something that could be adopted by everyone in every part of the world, with no forced religious implication, because it's something that is good for everyone.
Right.
We're talking about having a clear political vision. What are the big challenges we want to solve? The second one, regenerating the environment. We cannot live healthy in a sick planet. Now we know how much agriculture and the exploitation of environmental resources can impact also on human health. And you know how much we're working on this topic, that is strictly connected with the third point, that is human health. So, we're working on the algorithm of longevity, where we're measuring how much the food we're eating, the air we're breathing, the water we're drinking can impact on men's fertility, the quality of the breast milk, and also mental health, and so on. And this touches the fourth point, how we're living within our society. We know also that scientists are clearly showing with numbers how much sharing food is creating a positive effect also on our mental health, how much time we're spending caring about the environment, farming, preparing the table, cooking together, all of those things that seems naive anyway have a deep impact on
Yeah.
our brain health. Then we have another point, culture. In the last years, if I'm thinking about all the intangible heritages, lots of them are now related to food.
Mm.
We never considered that. At the beginning, also UNESCO didn't mention that. At some
Huh.
point, within the intangible heritages, they started preserving and safeguarding heritages that since millennia have been there. We're talking about knowledges that for decades and decades and centuries has been transferred and renovated within the history. So culture is another pillar. And the last one is economy. Economy needs to be part of the game, but this requires a profound shift, because the actual economic model is not the economic model that can allow the system to thrive in a way where, say, economies sometimes are prioritized in front of human life. So
Mm.
we see that many decisions in the last decades have been taken prioritizing profit. I'm not only saying sustainability, human life.
Mm. Yeah.
And so it's super complex. What are the
Yeah.
challenges we're
It super
facing?
is. A lot of
Uh,
stuff you're working on. I'm interested in that you are so much concerned about culture and kind of and looking back at how culture has been centered around food through millennia, and you're also concerned with the future, and I think you are interested in technology. So how, when we're here at the Smart Kitchen Summit, and we're talking about technology and we're talking about AI, how can we leverage these new technologies, but also ensure that these food heritages and this culture that we want to preserve, that often is so life sustaining, as you do work on, like, for example, blue zone and Mediterranean diet, how can we ensure that these learnings that you're working on, that you're gaining through these heritage sites, are then infused in these new technologies going forward? Because it seems like there's a tension there, right? Because AI so much wants us to maybe get away from that and kind of generate recipes with with AI, but we want to like embrace these healthy lessons that we've learned through these that you've learned working with heritage sites. How can we kind of resolve that tension? How can we make sure that the learnings that you're finding is built into the technologies for the future?
This is an amazing question. Also, because as we also experienced together when we were together in the last workshop in presence, the Vatican, thinking about AI
Yeah,
and food, I see that the 99% of the attention goes on what the technology can do
yeah,
and still being very focused on the technology. I see that the huge potential now is hidden in, let's say, the all the part that is going to allow us humans using this technology. Not only that, the technology now is super powerful. We can do everything. It's just a matter of what's the prompt we're gonna be able to write and
yeah,
create, and how we can train humans in a way that are going to use technology in a positive way. It's not bad, the technology itself, and the technology itself can do everything we want now. So it's amazing. But how we can train humans in a way that are going to adopt technology in the positive way, I think is the huge opportunity we see in front of us. Now, I think that AI can be an incredible tool. If I'm thinking about our major track of research that is related to future lands, high potential marginal areas everywhere in the world now are hiding a value that is incredible. And people living in big cities rely on these resources. So we need to make sure that create an alliance. How we can make sure that these marginal areas can really thrive thanks to this kind of technologies, because the farming system that you can put in place in some of those places, we call it heroic farming, of
mm,
course, because you have a super high quality say source in terms of natural resources. If you think about biodiversity, the quality of soil, the quality of water and so on that you find in these places. I'm thinking about Chilento and Polica and the lands of Mediterranean diet. It's exactly like that. But those thousands and thousands of olive trees are in steep that are almost impossible to harvest nowadays. Of course, technology, robotics, all of those things can allow us to start to use and manage those resources in the proper way. If I'm
yeah,
thinking about health, exactly the same, quantified self, but also any kind of technology that can allow us humans to know much more about what we need and how to manage our health. If you think about technology, if you think about logistics, energy, and so on, we need technology and we need to see technology as an
yeah,
ally, but also to rethink the relationship between public and private, between small cities and marginal areas, between small and big, between big food systems, big food organization, big food companies that needs to redesign also the relationship with the network of farmers, with cooperatives, with distribution, and so on. As you know, we work a lot also with R&D departments of food industries.
yeah,
And I know that probably in the audience, there's people working in this kind of industries. But if I'm thinking about the lots of buzzwords related to regenerative models and regenerative agriculture, sometimes wrongly adopted, because if you need to implement a regenerative system, you need to start to design your organization in a regenerative way. And this of course requires different kind of relationship and a
mm,
level of trust that we have been missing in these years. Trust between humans and organizations is something so critical now, and there needs to be an exchange. We cannot keep going with an extractive manner in our relationship between each other, in our relationship between organizations, in our relationship between the big that is exploiting the small, and so on.
That's great. It's so interesting that when we went to the Vatican and we did that workshop on the ethics of AI in the food system, I kind of took away some of the same things that you're talking about here, in that um, we're going to need these technologies maybe to help feed a growing population around the world, but at the same time, we need to make sure that they're human centered, that there's an ethical framework around these, and not just kind of using them. And it's so interesting to me. Also, you talked about you're already seeing in the young people coming through your education systems, maybe the impact of using AI and not necessarily kind of developing critical thinking skills. Did I hear you right on that part?
100%. The summer has been probably the sadness of my life.
Mm.
Probably we have been organizing with Team West more than 500 hackathons since when we started. Seeing kids running an hackathon, an idea challenge, a design challenge, asking to GPT, what's the solution? Is probably the way on how we can kill the creative and innovative process. Because basically, they are not anymore they're scouting, hunting, researching, criticizing, feeling emotion, feeling pain. I When we started the hackathon and the idea coming out of a normal hackathon, this is just a game,
Yeah.
were things that were touching the stomach of people. I'm upset about that and I want to solve this topic. When I want to solve this issue, I want to spend my time in trying to solve this problem that is touching someone, that is creating pain. We are painless. We live in a way that we're scrolling. We see kids dying for hunger, kids killed, but at the same time, someone talking about makeup, and we are not reacting anymore. And what we found this year, overall this year, working literally with in Polica, this until January, we've been working with more than 1,000 teenagers.
Wow.
In these groups of 1,000 teenagers, we found out that this generation is not able anymore to cry, to fight, to laugh, to smile, to be ironic,
Huh.
to make jokes of yourself, and to act. The fact that we are losing, let's say, the power of feeling emotions.
Wow.
We are
That's both,
scared about
I
a
imagine
hug.
that's social media as well. It's not just AI, right? It's the
Absolutely,
screen.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But this is showing, first of all, a huge polarization.
Mm.
We have super lucky kids that had the opportunity to feel this experience, to live this experience, and they are in a social framework that allows us to see all of that. But the majority of them, they're not lucky enough to have access to this kind of situation, cultural situation, social situation. They don't have maybe a family or a personal life that allows them to break the bubble sometime. And this is the thing, they're all living in their bubble, and there's no one that is breaking the bubble where they are, and that can show them what's life in reality,
Mm.
that is hurting them. this
Yeah.
this is the thing, we are all super violent or absolutely say painless, and we just survive. And this is absolutely a huge issue.
So, what are you thinking of when you're thinking about this? Because I think you do such a good job at training the next generation to be, uh, warriors on the front line of kind of building a more just and kind of sustainable food ecosystem. I think you're doing work that's really unparalleled in that space. And but when you see kind of the younger generation coming up, and there's this lack of critical thinking skills because they're all just looking for ideas through through prompts. They're becoming prompt engineers, not critical thinkers. What's the answer here? I mean, I don't expect you to boil the ocean and solve this for everyone, but within your own kind of uh, uh, within your own communities and your kind of your education systems, what are you thinking about answers here? I mean, it's early on. You probably don't have the answer, but
No,
what are
no,
some of your,
this is something which we're working a lot,
you're
because
wrestling
I
with,
want to
right? You're
solve
wrestling
the
with.
issue.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, and you are saying that I'm training warriors. My aim is to train very polite and gentle
yes.
warrior that are gonna change things, nudging the
Change makers. You're training
transformation.
change makers, maybe not warriors, right?
Exactly, but it's this is really the most critical thing, because we see now that we have been following all the flows, also supporting sometimes Greenpeace, Extinction Rebellions, the one that are the rebel. We need them because they are shaking us. But I also want to try to find what's the best way to make the change happen. This summer, we had an amazing opportunity to work with lots of creators. So I said, okay, I need to have creators on board and I need to work with them, the one that are talking with millions of views on TikTok, on Instagram, and so on, that have millions of followers. And what we found out working with them, that they're coming up with the same, say, outcomes, and they asked us to work together. We brought them to live experiences in person. Now, of course, with Gemini or any other AI, you can create any kind of video, and in few minutes, also their work in the next months ahead can be screwed up, actually. We brought them in the middle of the sea, spending the night with the fishermen, talking with the people on the ground, spending days
Mm.
with the farmers, or also with the food industry leader that can tell them, okay, I'm facing this issue. For them, was super powerful to live this experience as these experiences in person. And they started brainstorming with us on what we need now to bring people on board and let them live the same experiences. As you know, of course, like everyone, also during the pandemic, we've been approached by lots of VC that wanted to scale up education, digital education. Let's go for digital. You can do numbers, and in the business plan, okay, everything works well when you put the numbers of digital. But what we're missing, it's really to bring back the life, real life experience and connection,
Yeah.
and space for talking, for listening, for debating, for saying, okay, I'm criticizing your opinion. I disagree, but explain. So now we want to empower others to make it scalable. We need to have people in every community that open up industries, companies, labs, farms, boats, really to have people coming back to life, real life.
Yeah, because you can't welcome everyone in the world to Pollica or to Bologna. You need to basically, you have a limited capacity there. So what you're saying is you need to take this kind of your frameworks and your kind of ability to bring people together and kind of build new change makers and seed new places around the world. So how do you do that? How are you thinking about maybe seeding kind of new locations and kind of empowering people in the US and India and in Latin America to do this?
This is an open call to every outlier that is playing his role within an industry, a company, a minister, a municipality,
Mm.
a lab, a kitchen, a school. There are lots of outliers, and I want to celebrate the role of the outliers that are the one that sees that there's a friction, that are seeing the weak signals, that wants to try to change the things from the inside. And now we are working really also to share tools with all of them. There's not going to be Sara everywhere, and there's not going to be just Pollica and our Future Food Institute running these things. But there's a lot of people that, like you and many other friends, are changing things from inside the system. And I think that now this is an open call. We need to join forces. And we know many of them. Things are happening. We need to foster collaboration as much as we can, and we need to embrace also diversity and bring diversity on board as much as we can, both if we're doing product development, if we're developing a new service, a new tool, a new kitchen equipment. When you were talking before about the risk of the adoption of those technologies and so on, the risk I see is that we are creating a flat world, that we are unifying diet. The, when I'm thinking, people talking about the global diet, there's no global diet. I would forever fight a global diet, because diet is part of our cultural identity. And so working to keep diversity in every work environment, technology, and whatever is the thing we're doing, I think is one of the first priorities. Thinking about AI, for example, the adoption of AI can be very much helpful overall in marginalized places, in small places, in small municipalities, in small companies. But how you make sure that the identity, the dialects, the language, the history is preserved. What we are trying to do, as you know, at the campus in Polica, we are literally a living lab where we are asking everyone to prototype within the camp. So we are now touching not only food, that is the core part, but we are touching smart mobility, energy
Mhm.
cooperative models, health, and so on. What we see is that this is the issue. We need to create tools that can help an old mayor to create projects that are fitting with the young generations, that are preserving the heritage of the grandma, that are preserving but also the heritage or the new knowledge of the scientist. And who's designing these tools and who's creating the knowledge base, who's training the one that are going to adopt those technologies, has now the most important role, because we need to be able to include all the elements to make sure that those elements that are good for us and the
Yeah.
roots from where we need to build the next future needs to be are going to be part of the knowledge that we're going to transfer to the future.
So, how can people listening get involved and support your mission? I mean, obviously, getting in touch with you, getting in touch with the Future Food Institute. Like, what are you looking for? Like the next, you know, yeah, UNESCO site, the next old mayor that needs to kind of wants to revitalize his city, that maybe wants to bring in and kind of put a living lab there. Or what? There's lots of different needs you have. But can you kind of tell us what some of those are?
Absolutely. So first of all, get in touch. Every social media or our different media handles, get in touch because we are an hub. We are an ecosystem, and we love also to connect people within the ecosystem. And this is the first point. But then we have lots of events during the year in which we come up together with the broader community. Next one probably is going to be New York Climate Week. There's going to be a bunch of friends working on regen farming and regen systems and so on that are gonna be there. So everybody is complaining about those events. I see lots of values on these events because all the opportunity for all of us to come together is not sustainable. Yes, but if I have to choose, if I want to keep going and feeding and spark new projects and inspire new people, or the pollution I'm making, I try to compensate in another way, but I rather prefer to feed people and to make sure that there's an alliance with good people running projects on the ground. Climate Week, then we have Belém, then we have lots of other events that
Okay.
are going to be helpful to join forces. And then share projects. Now we're running initiatives everywhere in the world. In Asia, in say in the Caribbean and Latin America, in US, in Europe, of course, joining forces, saying, "Okay, I'm here. I would love to come up with something that can be helpful for you, but maybe you can share something with me." And there are lots of amazing ecosystems there. I'm thinking, for example, about the bioregional weaving lab or the weaving lab. This project started from Ashoka and a movement that is empowering social entrepreneurs. But what they're now coming up with are systems of communities and territories that are involving food producers, farmers, schools, and people that are weaving together and create local systems that are very positive. Lots of accelerators and incubators that now, of course, are going to change, I hope, the approach, because all of those epicenters of innovation were working 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now also the innovation that is needed, it's different. We need places like living labs where innovation happen at a systemic way. In these decades, and you know, because you have been we have been talking a lot about that. We've been working in a silo mode too much.
Yeah.
If you think about future of proteins, this has been really a, a kind of a buzzword for years and years. Future of proteins accelerator, just working on proteins, things working just on proteins. But then when I saw it in the adoption phase, I saw how much was difficult from the cultural perspective, from the
Yeah.
policy perspective, and so on. We never thought about let's think about what's going to be the future of protein at a systemic way, in a systemic level. How much this system is going to impact the local farming system, how much the adoption of this solution can impact on culture, on health, and
Yeah.
so on. So breaking the silo, creating innovation spaces at the systemic level, I think that this is really what is needed now. So also we are fostering innovation and we're talking about building the future, we need to change the way we were designing the spaces for innovation. And this is
Hmm.
exactly what we're doing. We're constantly prototyping and piloting and testing also what's the framework in which we can foster good innovation.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that needs to be done.
So much that needs to be done. I don't know how you do all that you do. There's a lot of great questions, by the way, coming in, or comments that are coming in the comment thread. I just want to highlight a few. Ayla Langer, who actually has been a graduate student in Italy, she's graduating from
Excellent.
Palenzo. She says she's noticed a strong cultural resistance to new technology and especially to AI. What's been missing is a space to critically explore how these tools might support a sustainable, just food system at scale. Without that dialogue, we risk missing opportunities for meaningful synergies. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I agree because it depends on how you propose the adoption of this technology, how it's been designed, say, the process of understanding. If we say, okay, tomorrow the machine is gonna substitute the work of your husband, your son, your father, your mother, your
Yeah.
sister, and you're gonna lose your work. Of course, I am gonna go against AI, but let's design what we can do that before we were not doing, how we can better our life thanks to the adoption of this technology, how we can benefit out of the adoption of this technology, how we can design the system. This is, of course, is going to change completely the perception, but also the awareness and say scouting the opportunities instead of seeing just the risks. I'm not saying not to see the risk because I touch the risk and I see
Yeah.
already the impact, the impact of that. But I also want to work on the framework around that. This is
Yeah.
what is going to make the difference.
It's interesting because I feel like Italy in particular has had a distrust of some of these new things that will impact cultural heritage. I think they made cultivated meat illegal. I think that there's been a larger, and as Ayla highlights in the comments at the university level, there's been a distrust of AI. And so I think it's intrinsic. I think in kind of a part of Italy's kind of fiber to really kind of protect their culture because and their food culture in particular. But so are you seeing these younger folks that are coming from other geographies, maybe from the U.S. and Canada, uh, maybe a little more trusting of these technologies, too trusting, and a little more susceptible to kind of losing those critical thinking skills? I mean, just wondering if you're seeing regional differences or country-based differences.
I see differences and I see that where there is much more confidence, sometimes there's not the understanding of what are the risks,
Yeah.
and we need to create a blending between the one that just see the risk and the bad part and the one that are so say friendly with these new technologies that are don't see the risk.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is the issue. And I think that, say, talking about culture is the core pillar. At UNESCO, World Day of Education last January, I was there. Everything was about AI. And they were featuring and sponsoring schools that are run by AI. In some way, I would say I would scream for that because I want that our kids are going to play with a good teacher that can inspire them, let them feel experiences, touch the fruit, smell the fruit, understand the seasonality, and all of those human things. On the other hand, I see that we need to redesign entirely the system in a way that AI and technology, whatever it is, the technology can do the things that are less important. But we need to design a huge a huge list of experiences, tools, and so on that needs to empower humans on all the other factors. and all the other values. Because if not, only technology is going to kill humans, is going to kill humanity. And so I see the risk, but I see, first of all, the opportunities we still have in front of us. So our country, yes, it's very much against technologies, against lab-grown meat, is against all of those things, and is protecting. I try to ping and trigger our community, our global community, but also at the national level, to start to see what are the things that we need inside the system to regenerate the knowledge and the culture. Because if we resist, at some point, the risk is that we're going to lose it, because
Yeah.
technology goes much faster, deeper, and stronger, and with a lot of investment that we cannot say, okay, no, no, stop, 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 stop. We cannot stop. So the only thing we can do is to grow together and learn how to use it in the proper way.
I don't know if people know your origin story, but I just want to go back and remind people why you decided to get into this, because I think it's so interesting. You ran a restaurant, so you were involved with food on the front lines. But what was it?
Yeah,
What was the trigger? What was the light bulb that went off in your head that said, I need to do more than just run a restaurant. I need to kind of help build a more
yeah.
just food ecosystem, build what it became the Future Food Institute.
Of course. So I started together with Andrea, my husband, and Matteo Vignoli, the other professor of innovation. And we started because we were entrepreneurs in food. We had a small farm and we were running restaurants and designing restaurants chain. So basically, restaurant, food services, and so on. And at some point, I was involved to be one of the delegates in the delegation at the G20 for the Young Entrepreneurs Alliance.
Okay.
So I was joining the G20 summit, working in a task force. And I was jumping in the different task forces, and I was seeing that food was always included. Food was always part of the issue, or something that could solve the issue. If we were talking about health and nutrition, if we were talking about trade, labor, whatever,
Mhm.
agriculture, of course, environment, energy. And so I came back that I was very frustrated because I was working in food and I never thought that my choices could have an impact. And from there, I started doing the reverse engineering of everything was in my plate, and I started being scared because I said, okay, I'm not taking decisions in a way that can create an impact both on both sides on what I'm buying that can influence the choice of a farmer or my CPG company or the impact on the health of my community. Because anyway, every time I'm designing a menu, this menu can transfer something that can be an act of care or can pollute or can get someone sick. And from there I started, and I started seeing that in Italy no one was caring about that. I'm coming from Bologna, so the meat industry
Yeah.
is big, and you can imagine it. There were not at all this awareness. It was much time before the SDGs were announced, before the World Expo in Italy, before the Paris Agreement, before Laudato Si, and so on. So before 2015, there were not at all this kind of awareness about what's the impact we as humans, but also we as food industry leader, food player, food producer, farmers, fishermen, or whatever we were making. So I started investigating and I saw that talking with other food entrepreneurs from my region, when I was talking about innovation, they were seeing innovation as an enemy. And I started reading, and I saw that in Wageningen, in the Netherlands, as well as in US, in the Bay Area, in UC Davis, and many other campuses, there were people dealing with food and technology and seeing innovation and food tech as a solution. 2012 was the first time in which someone made the first investment in food tech, was named food tech. So food tech, the word food tech started
Around then,
growing
yeah.
from 2012. And then Michael Baker created the Food Innovation Lab inside Google. And of course, this was the starting point of a brand new era also for me, because he involved me in the future in the Google Food Lab. And probably I started the Future Food Institute because of this meeting. It was 2013 with Michael, and it was just joining Google 2013, 2014,
Yeah.
and I was sharing with him my frustration. I was there just interviewing him and saying I have the dream of creating an ecosystem because I don't want to create a startup. I don't want to create just one solution. We need a systemic
Yeah.
platform and so on. And it's probably thanks to him that at the end I said, okay, Future Food Institute is going to be the name, and let's start with this ecosystem.
That's great. I didn't know that part where you and Michael were talking so early. And Michael
Yeah,
Bacher now
yeah,
is the president of the CIA, Culinary Institute of America, not the
yeah.
Central Intelligence Agency. And he's been at the center of some of these early conversations. But as we wrap up, any kind of final words of hope you would give people listening in? Because
Hope.
it is easy to lose hope nowadays because there are so many challenges. What would you tell them?
I would tell, let's really start to talk about gastro diplomacy. Let's see what's the power we are holding in our hands. I know that here there are lots of people touching food from many different
Mhm.
perspectives, many different lenses. Someone in the industry, someone in the kitchen appliance, someone in food production, someone inside academies or research centers. I think that we need to start to bring back what's the value of food, because each time we're gathering around the table, we're honoring our past, we care about the people around us, but also we're preparing for our future. So it's an important thing, the one we're doing. Whatever is your role, whoever is behind the scene of this screen, we can take lots of decisions that can have huge impact. So it's really a call to all of us. And probably if you're joining this session, you are a little bit an outlier in your system. You are curious enough that you want to investigate and you want to change the status quo. So I really hope that you're gonna answer to this call in your system and make it happen in your daily work.
Well, I put your LinkedIn there. I also put the website address for the Future Food Institute, which is a great website that has all the different things that you're building that's kind of the umbrella organization. And we're working together in partnership with the Spoon and the Future Food Institute on the Food AI Collab, where we're bringing people together to talk about how AI is changing food. And we're going to really start talking and digging into maybe some of the deeper issues, not just talking to startups, but how AI, how we need to kind of react to AI, make sure that humans stay at the center of the food conversation. So I enjoy and look forward to doing that with you. But thank you so much for this, Sarah. I always enjoy talking to you. This has been great.
Thank you so much. And let's invite all of them to share if they have curiosity or want to investigate more this topic, because we have another year in front of us of meetings and collabs. So you are all invited to share thoughts and ideas.
So well put.